Howdy everybody, welcome back to Tuesday Guusday. Today we're going to be talking about Accel Stardust, which is a card that we've known has existed for a while, but it is coming out very soon in Maze of Memories. Thankfully, because this card enables so many synchro decks to have even more options and extension. One of these decks in particular would be any deck that can make level 8s and uses, of course, level 2 or lower tuners. And a deck like Ghoti, of course. You all know that I love Ghoti. This card fits extremely well into this deck. We can make level 8s pretty frequently, and this card being able to make any synchro during our opponent's turn, not just fish synchros, is a huge deal. So I'm going to show you a little bit of the combos here, some of the ways that you can get it out. You can play things like Ready Fusion if you want to for the tuner monsters, but I prefer Supe, so I'm going to be showing off Supe here. And who knows, maybe even like the Escator Dawnwalker would be good in this deck now because you have a nice level 8 to make that can revive any of your 2s. So that might be something to look out for in the future. I might try testing a little bit with some of that stuff. This is just going to be a little example of the kinds of options that the Accel can give you. So we're going to start by summoning out the Supe. You can discard pretty much anything you want. If you discard any fish, it's even better because this combo likes having a lot of fish engrave for things like Snopius. So we're going to go straight for the Orianpos here. We're going to banish the tuner that we don't already have. So if you have Paces in hand, you can banish Schiff. If you have Schiff in hand, you can banish Paces. If you have Zep in hand, then, you know, fuck you, I guess. Just don't draw the brick. We're going to go ahead and normal summon out our little guy. We can go straight for Accel. Now, unfortunately, we have now summoned 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. So this combo is weak to Nibiru. So what we're going to do is we're going to chainlink 1, the Orianpos, and then chainlink 2, the Accel. So this will ensure that our Orianpos will go through so that we can search for a Snopius. And then we will use Accel to summon back at level 2 or lower tuner, which will be the Paces, because we don't have much more material in grave at this point. So what we're actually going to do, and this may be a bit more of a risky play, and that is we're going to go for Paces to summon Snopius. Now there is a line where if your discard off of Supe was a fish monster, you can make Barone here instead because these add up to Barone. And then you can banish the Paces and your other fish to summon the Snopius. So if you want that Barone protection, you can do this. But for the sake of this combo, we're just going to assume that the discard was just an unnecessary card in our hand that we don't really need. Because ultimately, they will accomplish mostly the same thing. Right, so you'll see we can end our combo here. We're going to Snopius target itself on summon. That's pretty important. That's something that you can't forget to do as a Ghoti player, is forget to use your Snopius. Because if you use it targeting itself, it'll banish itself, which will let you add it back to hand. So that you can use it again on the follow-up turn. So that's something that you always need to remember to do. So now we have both of our tuners were banished during that turn, so now we have access to both of our tuners. We have 2 level 2s, and we have a 6 and an 8. So basically, this means that we have access to our entire level 8 and level 10 toolbox in our extra deck. So while you can make Barone going on the first turn, I'm not sure if there's really a reason to, because before you summon Barone, you're still in Nibiru range. So the only reason to not make Barone is if you're like super scared of things like potentially Raigeki or Lava Golem, Sphere Mode, and even Book of Eclipse. But most of those cards really aren't played in the main deck, so game 1 you don't really need to worry about that kind of thing. Games 2 and 3, it might be best to try to make the Baron if you haven't been nibbed, to help play around any kind of board breakers. So let's say our opponent commits to some kind of action, right? We now know what deck they're playing, so we can use Accel to tag out into a Stardust. And if you read Accel very carefully, it says you contribute this card special a Stardust, and then immediately synchro summon using monsters you control as material. So you don't necessarily have to use the Stardust as material, which means we have access to our entire level 8 and level 10 pool at this moment. So if you see what your opponent's playing and you know that they're on a deck that loses to an Omni Negate, then you can make Barone. If they're on a deck that can't out Ice Jade Gamir, you can make Gamir. If you need like quick spot removal, you can make Azcan. And if they're a deck that plays a lot of spells and traps, you can make something like Dragite. And then of course Deep Beyond and Chinging are also here. These are kind of staples for the deck. So it's just an entire toolbox of cards that this deck now has access to. And these are, these are the basic, most important examples, but there's probably a lot of really niche cards, like even Ruddy Rose Dragon is another good one. If your opponent's on some kind of like super graveyard reliant deck, which, those haven't been popular in about a month. So yeah, it's just the entire rank 8 and 10 toolbox at your disposal now, thanks to Accel Synchron, which is a weakness that Ghoti has had for a while, that you can only quick synchro for fish monsters, but now you have access to the entire pool. So for example, we're just gonna, chill. So for example, let's just say we see our opponent's weak to something like Barone. That Omni Negate is going to be really valuable against their deck. Then we can go for that. And then of course we still have a 2 and a 6 on our field to make something like an Azcan or a White or a Whale. That we still have that spot removal going into the opponent's turn. Now, if you used the Snopius effect on itself, which you should have done, you can actually, when you summon Azcan, you can chainlink 1 and then chainlink 2 Snopius. It's not super important, the chainlink, but if they have something like maybe a Sprite Red on board, it can matter. But what we're going to do is we're going to banish one of our level 2s to add Snopius back, and then Azcan will resolve, banishing our opponent's monster, whatever it is. And then Azcan effect Engrave, we will banish the other level 2, so now we have both level 2s banished again. And we have all of our monsters back. And then on the follow-up turn, we have all of our tuners, we have a Snopius in hand, and we have, like, every card you could ever want to just summon out and then OTK your opponent. There is a way that if you have Abyss Shark, you can use that. Abyss Shark can be a little clunky with Accel Synchro because it locks you into waters and requires only waters on field to use it. So it can be a little bit clunky. But there is a way to do it if you go for something like an Ice Jade turn 1 or a Sword Soul turn 1, which are not bad cards to have turn 1 regardless. Because they're still interruption and they're still like impossible to remove from the board. So let me go ahead and move on to the next one here. So this next one here is going to be slightly different, but it's basically the same principle. For example, like if you... let's just get on with it. so I'm not sitting here talking your head off all day. We're gonna start it off pretty much the same way, going for Supe to Arianpos. We're gonna go for the Accel Stardust here, and then use both effects as we did the first time. We're gonna go ahead and add the Lifeless Leaffish. So what we can do here is we can use Pace's effect, because we haven't used Pace's yet. So we can add any level 6 or lower fish, and then just summon it with Pace's. It would be really cool if we could summon, like, Coelacanth here, but unfortunately the numbers just don't quite line up. So we're going to use the we're going to use the Paces to summon the Leaffish. And at this point, we already have both tuners banished. So what we're going to do with the Leaffish is we're going to send the Snopius this time. So now we're going to get both tuners back. And so the way that this differs from the previous combo is that it will, you know, we're going to make Arianpos during our opponent's turn, which will banish the Zep. So you'll notice we didn't even use Zep in the last combo. So if you go for this route, it'll put a Zep in rotation, so that when you start looping your Snopius, you also have the Zep engrave, so that you have like the Snopius Zep during the opponent's turn. So you have that kind of line if you think the game is going to go longer, right? So this might be something to go for if you know the match is going to be a grind game, like say you finished game 1 or whatever, your opponent's on a really grindy deck, and you want access to like Snopius loops with Zep, you can go for this line, and it pretty much accomplishes the same thing, because you'll notice right here, we're at the exact same spot that we were in the first combo, where we have 2 tuners and a 6 and an 8, so it's pretty much the same. It just gets Zep into rotation. It's just it's just that this combo is a little more vulnerable to disruption because there's a lot more moving steps. Whereas the last combo, you end on this, like at the start of your opponent's turn, and doesn't really give your opponent much time to interact. Yeah, there's just a lot more moving parts to this version, but it can pay off for you if you want to get Zep into rotation along with the Snopius. So you can see here we're just going to go for, you know, almost all the same stuff. Also, making another Arianpos means that you can search for something like another starter or an Abyss Shark, so that on the crackback turn, after your opponent's turn, you have access to like another starter or extender, which is another boon for this version of the combo. Again, if it's going to be like a really grindy match, you want as many resources as possible. So, again, we just have all of the same stuff here. I wish the animations wouldn't get in the way of that button. So yeah, we can see you have the Baronne, you have the Azcan. It's all the same stuff as last game. And then, of course, during your opponent's turn, we already used Zep, but you can go ahead and summon out the Arianpos just to get all your tuners banished. And then it's all the same story as last time, where you should have more than enough material. You know, if you interrupt your opponent enough with your monsters and your hand traps, or if they don't have an out to Gamir, or if they don't have an out to Chengying, things like that. Even a White or a Whale board wipe can sometimes be enough. And Baron plus Dragite can also be pretty annoying for decks like Branded, because you can use one of them to negate Lost, and then the other one to negate Fusion, and then they're just kind of screwed, right? So yeah, Accel Synchron opens up tons and tons of options for this deck, way more than we had previously, along with cards like Gamir, which is super good against what I would consider to be the top 2 decks in the format, which is Kashtira and Branded. Maybe not the top 2, but the most popular 2. Both of those decks have a really hard time getting rid of this. And being able to set it up so easily now in Ghoti is such a nice thing to have. And this card's going to be even easier to set up when Cyberstorm Access comes out, because we get basically a water Longwan that summons this for free. So that'll be nice. But yeah, that's just going to be today's Tuesday Guusday, or this week's Tuesday Guusday. Going over just some simple applications with the Accel in Ghoti. Ghoti's place in the meta is still kind of weird. It's not... I think it's actually worse now than it was last format, because the deck had a pretty decent tier matchup. But this deck literally cannot beat an Arise Heart, because it just... every time you banish one of your tuners, it just attaches to it as material, and you just basically don't get to play the game. So that's fun. So if you want to play Ghoti, you're going to have to heavily tech for Kashtira, I think, if you're going to be playing this deck at a tournament level.